for the last couple of weeks, I've been helping my mom organize things. She's moved into assisted living. She had a serious health issue and she's 87 years old. So she was in her house of 60 years and now then had to downsize to a place where there's just one clothing closet. And so I've been helping her sort through lots and lots of things. And as I was sorting through some clothing, I found some really nice pieces of wool clothes, you know, like pants and coats and just sweaters, like beautifully hand knit sweaters that were wool that actually had holes in them. And I'm like, oh no, the moths got into them. My mom was so careful about how she kept everything, you know, really neat and tidy. But it's like even the most careful person, if they store things away, they're going to see things that come in. If there's been metal, like rust, like I found jewelry that had like just, I don't know what, that it rusted through. And so I'm like, rust, moths. Wow, this is making me think about a verse in the Bible that Jesus, you know, Jesus's words about don't store up treasures on earth where, you know, moths can destroy. Well, that's what happened. And where rust can, you know, eat away at, and where thieves can break in. But store up for yourselves treasure in heaven where no moths can destroy it. So I'm just going to read that to you. And again, I'm not trying to throw my mom or anybody around the bus because under the bus, because I'd have to throw myself under the bus, actually, because I think, you know, some of us have issues with not being able to. Oh, sorry. It's not easy to do these things that Jesus tells us. And he says, I'll read it. Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So you could say, where your heart is, that's where your treasure is. You could say the opposite, which is true. And I guess that is really that those words have really been going through my mind and my heart lately. What does it mean to store up for yourselves treasures in heaven? What does that look like? And then where it says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Well, for Jewish people, the heart is actually like your mind. So it's what you think about is like what you, or you could say what you set your heart on, what you set your mind on is what you value. And Jesus goes on to say that you can't serve two masters. So either you're going to hate one and love the other, or you're going to be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve God and wealth. So I think we could be wealthy in different ways. It's not just things, although that definitely falls under the category of wealth, but you know, our time, you know, is valuable. People say that time is money, right? So it's basically what we value, what we have here on earth, and how we look at it will impact, you know, our relationship with God as well, and just like how we're rewarded, you know. And I think that it's important, you know, otherwise Jesus wouldn't be telling us these things. And I think the problem is often anxiety. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm afraid to move things on. So in my house, we have kind of stages of moving things on. And we did this with our kids. When they weren't ready to pass on the Beanie Babies and the stuffed animals, we kind of put them on vacation for a while in the basement. And then if the kids didn't remember it, then by the time we found them, they wouldn't be in such good shape, right, Anna? They'd smell weird and stuff, and they'd be like, ugh. So then they'd finally go out. But same with us, like when we weren't ready to get rid of that really still good, kind of good thing that we just could fix and it would be fine. Or if I lost a little weight, I'd fit back into it. Or, you know, if I gained a little weight, maybe I should keep that thing. I mean, that to me, I'm just speaking personally, not judging anyone else, but for me, that has to do with anxiety. And so the words that follow here about anxiety, Jesus says, for this reason, it's all about this anxiety problem. He says, I say to you, don't worry about your life, you know, anything about it, what you're going to eat or drink or what you're going to wear or any of these things, because God knows. And, you know, we can't change anything just by worrying about stuff and even just storing things up or, you know, keeping those extra things that we don't need. I mean, I have to tell you something. This is really embarrassing. I even kept like baby clothes, not just my kids' baby clothes, but somebody said, here are these cool baby clothes, you know, you should pass them on. I'm like, well, maybe I should keep them for my kids, you know, because these are so cute. And I feel like maybe God is saying, well, just give them to someone who has a baby now. I'm like, oh, but I just want to see them on my grandchildren, you know? And so, but then that requires like packing them somewhere. And same with other stuff like, oh, I could really use this thing. Or what if my kids would want this thing from grandma? Or what if they don't? And I found that to be the case so many times, that my taste is not my kids' taste. And so what makes me think that they're going to want the stuff that I think they should want later when they get their own place or something? And anyways, I'm just kind of confessing, maybe that helps me move stuff along. So after spinning like along, I'm still in the process, you know, of helping my mom downsize there at her house and move things away. It was hard, like to get rid of these things that, oh, I remember the old cuckoo clock, but yet it's broken. Well, maybe I should go fix it. But all that is like, it's consuming. Maybe I should fix that. And like after living in Honduras for 6 years and having people go through our trash, literally, like I'm talking tin cans, I'm talking plastic bags, and being able to repair things or use things that we actually throw out and literally would be in landfill there. We had our own little landfill place, which brought it home. Like if we couldn't figure out what to do with it, it would have to go in the landfill. But not a lot of stuff went into the landfill. I can't help, oh wait, yeah, okay. Good point. Every Sunday, this is a moment for you to think and ponder these words. So I was just going to say that not a lot of stuff went into the landfill because people would use our junk. And so therefore, I think maybe that's my excuse, is that I just have a hard time throwing away things. And this is the throwaway culture par excellence. And we have the throwaway culture of the world, don't we? Where you can't hear anything? Oh man. Are we able to turn up the volume here, or should I shout? Just because of the train mostly? So you've heard nothing so far much, or is it just the train? Not much. Okay. Where is a better place to sit so that people who have a harder time hearing can hear it? Over here? Or... So if you're having a harder time hearing, maybe over there by the corn. All right. Okay, cool. I was just saying that maybe it's an excuse that I've used, that I have a hard time throwing stuff out because like people in Honduras don't. And so I feel guilty about that. But at the same time, I'm really realizing that if we store up stuff too much, then we have to manage that stuff. We have to always, it takes up space, not only in our house, but in our minds. And I feel like the solution or the remedy for storing things up, well, I think there's two things. The first thing is to deal with the problem of anxiety, because I think we need to get at the root cause. Why do we store things up? I think it has to do with our anxiety about not having tomorrow, not having something tomorrow when we might need it. And who's going to help me if I don't help myself, right? But Jesus says here, don't worry about tomorrow, because today has enough trouble of its own. He doesn't say you never have trouble, you'll never have challenge, but he just says, don't worry about tomorrow, because today has enough of its own to worry about. So does that mean that that frees me to be able to share what I have with someone who might be in need? So we had an opportunity to think about that when there was a person who needed a tent. And I'm like, Bob's like, yeah, I'm going to give this person, I'm thinking about this tent. I'm like, well, how many person tent is it? Well, it's a 4-person tent. I'm like, oh, okay. And there's just a tiny little thing that came up that was like, well, what if you needed that? But I'm like, these people don't have a place to stay. So why does that even cross my mind? Like, that is so ridiculous. And I think all of us have that little thing that comes up. I know somebody who got a car, and then they had two cars, and then somebody else who had a need, they gave that car away, and I thought that's really amazing. But then that person, the other car, something happened to that car, then they didn't have a car. So people could say, well, you see, that's what happens when you're generous that way. You should have kept the second car, because you don't have a car. And that's, I think, what our whole social, like insurance, you can get insurance for everything, all your appliances, or you can get pet insurance, dental insurance. I mean, everything you can think about getting insurance for. Basically, it's anti-faith. And I'm not saying that if you have insurance, you have no faith, because I have insurance, I believe in that. But I think we can go overboard in just trusting in providing for ourselves. And that comes out of a fear, out of anxiety of not having. Whereas Jesus is like, give freely, and don't store up treasures. It's not a bad thing to even have wealth, but if there's any bit of our heart that's involved with those things that we're storing, like, value, like attachment. And I'm one of those people that can attach to things. I even attached to some of my kids' toys, and they were cute. And I think about that, or the old cuckoo clock that I grew up with. And it was hard for me when we found that in my mom's attic. Okay, she wasn't on her wall, it was in her attic, broken. And why did I have a hard time doing something with the broken things, the rusty things, even the mothball things? My brother's like, well, I don't know if we should throw that out. It's like a hand knit thing. I'm like, I could probably reweave it or something. And then this thought came into my mind. You are crazy. No, you really didn't do that. Well, maybe I could have, but anyway, so I just want to say that I think that these reasons, anxiety, that's one of the roots of lack of maybe generosity, or even just freedom from our stuff. Freedom from it, which we actually need to get. So just a second, I got to put this down. Balancing act. Anna, can you come up here and be my stand, please? Thank you. Because anyway, you're going to talk in a sec. Not right now, but one second. So we are told in Colossians 3:23, whatever you do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. And so I think when we do things, we should do it for the Lord, because sometimes giving away can go unnoticed. If you're generous with someone, even with your time, they may not notice it. But we're doing this for God. This is about the kingdom. And I think the bottom line here is that, Jesus knows, if you could just put your hand out there. Thank you. Be my stand there. Jesus knows that that we want to be treated with love and respect. And he showed us how to do that. And so, the bottom line, I think, is that Jesus says, in everything, therefore, and here comes the golden rule that we grew up with, in everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets. So Jesus sums up everything that he's been teaching about to his disciples here, about not worrying, about don't stir up treasures, and about seeking first the kingdom of heaven, and then everything else will be added to you. Even if you think, well, if I give that away, what am I going to have? All this boils down to trusting God, God's love. And that when we trust God, we trust God's generosity to take care of us. And when we do that, we will have the ability to treat people the same way that we want to be treated. And so I thought I'd give Anna the opportunity to share a few words, because we've been talking about this idea of generosity as the remedy for kind of the tendency to hang on to stuff and not be generous. So want to step up to the plate
Yep.
here. So people can see you. I'll hold your water.
It's hot out.
By the way, this is Anna, our daughter.
Yeah. So I was just kind of like sitting there thinking, how am I going to share this? But I just wanted to start out with a question of how many people here have had someone be really generous to them or go out of their way for them? Do you want to raise your hand? And how did that feel when someone went out of their way for you or they were generous with you?
Really good.
How did it make you feel about yourself? I don't know if people heard, how did you feel about yourself when they treated you like that? Pretty good? Valued? Loved? I know for myself, the times when I felt like God was moving me to be more of a generous person was when people were really generous with me. I remember this one girl in London. She had really little money. She was a student, a college student. And every time we went out, she would always insist to pay for me every time. And when I tried to pay, she'd say, nope, I'm not letting you. And she was joyful about it. Like she wanted to genuinely. And I've always struggled with generosity, like being a generous person. And it's something God's been really moving my heart about for the last, I would say the last 2 years, especially, just to be more generous and to seize opportunities when it looks like somebody needs help, and to be able to read somebody's body language or just read between the lines. Because a lot of times people won't tell you if they're in need or if they're struggling, unless you actually look outward and notice them and notice what they're saying or not saying. Because I think it's really easy to, when someone is subtle or they say some comment about needing help with something, to kind of just not make eye contact or to just pretend you didn't hear what they said. And then the moment's over and you didn't help them. And then you go away feeling like, why didn't I just help the person? It was only $5. It was only like a soda. Or, why didn't I offer to get them a drink? Or why didn't I offer to pay for their food or something like that? And I thought of this quote the other day. If you are not generous when it's difficult, you will not be generous when it's easy. Generosity is a function of the heart, not the wallet. That's one quote. And then, no one has ever become poor by giving. That's from Anne Frank. And then this is my favorite one that God's been speaking to me about. It's Proverbs 11:24. And it says, one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another person withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. So it's this thought of I've had this so many times where I thought, I need to keep this for myself. I need to hoard and be a tightwad and not share, or just, I'll think well, I don't have money or something like that. And sometimes I don't have money, but I think generosity is sometimes an act of going out of your way for someone. It's not always money. Sometimes it's just taking time for someone or going to where they are. And I wanted to share this because I don't know if a lot of people know this, and I'm not sharing this to make people feel sorry for me, but a lot of times I actually go out of my way for my friends a lot. And I would say very few, if any, of my friends that I have really gone out of their way for me. And I'm not keeping score, but at the same time, sometimes it has been hurtful when I've driven. I have some friends in Seattle, and I always drive to see them every time. I will pay for the gas and drive. And sometimes I haven't had a job, and I would still go out of my way. And I would do it joyfully, because to me, my friend is more worth it than my money. And I want them to feel valued and loved, and that I'm going out of my way for them. And but sometimes it's been hurtful too, when that same friend would never come visit me. And it's almost like they would just have this, like they would expect me to always go out of my way. And a lot of times people are like that. They're selfish. And I'm selfish too sometimes, but a lot of people just think, well, someone's just making it easy for me, and they'll always do that. So I don't have to go out of my way for them. But I don't know. I guess I want to ask you guys another question. How have you felt when you were in need and somebody could have helped you, but they decided not to, or they didn't make eye contact with you, or they just pretended they didn't hear you when they knew that you were in a bad situation financially? Do you want to raise your hand? And how did that make you feel about yourself and like your worth? Did that ever make you feel like they didn't really value you or like see you as important to them? I know for myself, I've had that a lot of times, and recently as well, with some people that I won't name. But I think what God has been speaking to me about is just that love is not about, it's not a transaction, and it's not about what you don't just, I think the mindset to have is not thinking if I give to this person or do this, then they will give back to me, or something like that, where you're like, you have strings attached where you think, oh, well, like I've been so generous with them, or I've done this and this and that. Why haven't they done this? And where you have like this imaginary scoreboard. I don't think that that's how God works. And yet, like, I find myself doing that sometimes, and I have to check my heart and say, okay, God, where is my heart at? And am I doing this with the right motive? Am I loving this person genuinely without expecting anything in return? And I think love to me looks like giving to someone else and showing them the love of God. And Jesus died on the cross for us. He died while we were still sinners, and while we put him on the cross and people were spitting at him, and he still died for us, and he wasn't expecting anything in return. In fact, he knew that a lot of those people weren't going to come to him and love him, and he still died for everyone. And so I think that's really radical and challenging. And I think there's one more quote I wanted to share, and then I'll be done. And also, I don't think, sorry?
They know not what they've done. They don't.
Yeah. And also, I think it's really important. One thing I wanted to mention too was to look at yourself and your own heart. And it's really easy to like make someone else the enemy, especially if you've been hurt, to think like I've been so wronged, or to kind of feel sorry for yourself as well. And maybe it's justified, like maybe you have a lot of reasons to feel like that way. But I think what's really important is that we look at our own hearts, because that's where the change starts, is with yourself. And, you know, when you have, like, we're all selfish by nature, like, and we all think about, you know, keeping our own money or our own possessions. And like my mom was saying, there's like that fearful mindset and anxiety of like thinking, well, if I give away, then I'm going to be poor. I'm not going to have anything for myself. And like, I think we need to be filled with God's love and realize how much he loves us, and also trust him. Because I think being generous and going out of your way for people is an act of faith, and it's sacrifice as well. To just trust that whatever you're doing is gonna, you might not get that reward right away, but loving is giving, and God sees what you're doing, and he's gonna reward you somehow.
And thank you, Anna. And the somehow we can't control. So when I was thinking, what is it that, how is it a treasure if I can't see it right now? And I feel like God is saying, you will, and you are, but maybe you're just not even aware of it if you're even asking that question. So don't worry about it. God wants to give us more than we can ask or imagine, more than we can even think. So let's just pray right now. Thanks, Anna. So God, we confess to you that we are afraid of not having enough. And we confess that we don't always trust that you will take care of us. It's hard just to keep our minds on this one day and not to let our minds go to the fear of what could happen in the future if we are lacking things. And I just pray that you would heal our hearts to where we would treasure you and your kingdom above everything else, that you would just give us such a desire to really know what it is to bring the kingdom of God in our own homes and everywhere we go. And we just pray this in your mighty name, Jesus. Amen.